Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a concept that, well, it seems simple enough on the surface, doesn't it? Miracles.
It does.
But it gets complicated fast. We all sort of feel we know what a miracle is, maybe an impossible recovery, something like that.
Right.
Yet, as Yuji Nagasawa pointed out, actually pinning down a precise definition, that's surprisingly hard.
Oh, absolutely. It seems straightforward, but then you peel back the layers and you find centuries of philosophical debate underneath.
Centuries.
Really? Robert Bruce Mellon's research actually found something like 48 different contemporary definitions of a miracle. 48?
Wow. Okay, so this isn't just arguing over words then.
Not at all. These definitions often get right down to fundamental disagreements, about reality itself, whether there's a God, how the natural and, well, the supernatural might interact.
So our goal today in this deep dive is to unpack some of that complexity.
Exactly. We'll be looking at different viewpoints, drawing from excerpts of a definition of miracle, trying to understand how thinkers, believers, skeptics, everyone in between have wrestled with this idea.
Sounds good. We want to get a clearer picture without getting lost in, super technical jargon.
That's the plan. A journey through the ideas.
Okay, so where do we start? A good starting point is often David Hume, right? Even though he was famously skeptical about miracles.
Definitely. His definition from the 18th century is hugely influential. He defined a miracle as a transgression of a law of nature by a particular volition of the deity or by the interposition of some invisible agent.
Transgression of a law of nature. So right away, it's about breaking the rules, something outside nature messing with nature's laws.
Precisely. Hume sets the stage. Miracles as exceptions, breaks in the normal order, linked directly to God or some other supernatural force.
Okay. Now, fast forward a bit. How do more recent thinkers build on that or challenge it? You mentioned Yuji Nagasawa.
Right. Nagasawa gives us a more detailed list. He talks about 8 common features people associate with miracles. Things like they cause wonder and amazement.
Makes sense.
They're beyond human control. They have positive outcomes, usually. They have religious meaning. They're intentional acts by some agent. And here's the key link back to Hume. They involve a violation of the laws of nature.
Okay, so that's a richer picture. But he simplifies it too, doesn't he?
He does. He kind of boils it down to a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature that is caused by an intentional agent, and it has religious significance.
That feels pretty close to what most people probably think a miracle is.
I think so. And he uses examples like Jesus changing water to wine or raising the dead. Those fit perfectly.
Yeah.
But then he contrasts that with, say, you narrowly avoiding a car crash. Lucky maybe even feels providential, but under this definition, it might lack that clear intentional agent or the specific religious significance.
So it's not just that a law of nature seems broken. It's also who did it and why. The intention and the meaning matter just as much for Nagasawa.
Exactly. That's a crucial filter he adds. It means not every amazing or fortunate thing counts. Now, if you want really concise, look at C.S. Lewis.
Oh, yeah. What's his take?
Super brief. An interference with nature by supernatural power.
Wow. Can't get much shorter than that.
Just cuts to the chase. So these initial ideas, Hume, Nagasawa, Lewis, they all focus on this external force breaking in, interfering with the natural order somehow.
Yeah, that seems to be the common thread early on. But you mentioned other definitions, suggesting maybe not everyone agrees it has to be a violation.
That's right. And that's where things get really interesting. Richard Swinburne, for example, a major contemporary philosopher.
Okay.
His definition is, a miracle is an event of an extraordinary kind brought about by a god and of religious significance.
Okay, so extraordinary event brought about by a god. Religious significance. What's missing compared to Hume or Nagasawa?
The explicit mention of violating natural law. It's not there.
Interesting. So for Swinburne, it's extraordinary, it's divine, it's meaningful, but maybe it doesn't strictly break a law.
It might, but it doesn't have to, according to this definition. The religious significance could come from how it fits into God's purpose, or maybe confirms a specific teaching. It broadens the scope a bit.
So we're already seeing a split on this key point. Violation necessary or not.
Exactly. Swinburne focuses more on the event's nature and source, while Hume and Nagasawa really hammer that transgression aspect. It's a subtle shift, but it has big implications.
And there are others who push this even further, away from the violation idea.
Yes, Robert Larmer is another key figure here. His definition is, let me get it right, an unusual and religiously significant event which reveals and furthers God's purposes, is beyond the power of physical nature to produce, and is caused by an agent who transcends physical nature.
Okay, beyond the power of physical nature to produce. Sounds different again.
It is. Larmer explicitly moves away from definitions that insist on a violation. He focuses instead on whether nature, left to itself, could ever bring this event about.
So it's less about breaking rules and more about exceeding nature's own capabilities.
Precisely. And it has to be caused by something or someone outside of that natural system.
This really highlights the central disagreement then. Does a miracle break the laws of nature, or does it just operate outside of them, doing something nature can't?
That's the nub of it. And it often correlates with belief. R.F. Holland noted that most people probably think of miracles as violations.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And he also points out that many who define them that way tend to think they're impossible. Paul Tillich agreed. He said the ordinary definition involves contradicting natural laws and then flatly stated such things don't happen.
So is there a sense that some skeptics define miracles as violations precisely because it sets such a high, maybe impossible bar?
That's certainly a perspective discussed in the source. Define it as something that shatters the very foundations of reality as we know it. And, well, it's easier to dismiss any claims.
Though, wouldn't a strict naturalist argue that any genuine miracle would have to be a violation of natural laws by definition?
That's a very fair counterpoint. If you assume nature is a closed system governed by consistent laws, then yes, any external intervention would logically have to be a break, a violation.
Okay.
But conversely, the source notes that those more open to miracles often prefer definitions that don't insist on violation. They might talk about suspension, or God working with nature in a novel way, or simply acting beyond nature's known limits. It reflects different starting assumptions about reality.
This really forces us to ask a pretty basic question then. What are these laws of nature we keep talking about?
You'd think that would be front and center in these debates, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But the source points out it's actually discussed less thoroughly than you might expect by both sides.
Huh. Strange. So what do we know about how these thinkers see natural laws?
Well, Antony Flew, before his later shift in views, offered a simple take. A law of nature is just a regularity or symmetry in nature. He argued you'd need incredibly strong proof to show a real exception.
Okay, regularity. And Swinburne, how does he see it? He mentioned the Humean idea of a non-repeatable counter-instance.
Right. That's how he frames Hume's view of a violation. It's a one-off event that breaks the pattern and doesn't happen again under the same conditions.
But Swinburne's own view?
He sees natural laws more as principles embedded in nature determining what happens. They can be fundamental or derived from more basic laws.
Okay.
And here's a key point he makes. Even if laws are deterministic, meaning they seem to dictate outcomes rigidly, a superior power, like God, could still override them if such a God exists and chooses to act. And if laws are indeterministic or probabilistic, just describing what usually happens.
Like much of modern physics suggests.
Exactly. Then they pose even less of a barrier. An unusual event, whether natural or supernatural, might just be, well, unusual, not necessarily a violation in the strictest sense.
That's fascinating. And the source says even committed skeptics like Flew in his atheist days or Mackey or Shapiro conceded this theoretical possibility, that God could potentially override natural laws.
Yes, they acknowledge the logical possibility given a God with certain powers and intentions. The real debate for them, of course, was whether there's any good reason or evidence to think such a being exists or has ever acted that way.
Right. The sticking point isn't necessarily the concept, but the evidence.
Precisely. And we also need to remember, our understanding of these laws isn't set in stone.
Good point. Science evolve.
Think about the model of the electron-Thomson Bohr quantum mechanics. Our understanding changed dramatically. What seems like an unbreakable law today might be seen differently tomorrow. Swinburne even thinks Hume might have accepted miracles if he'd had a more nuanced view of natural law, one allowing for these non-repeatable divine actions.
And there's been a big shift from seeing laws as absolutely universal to seeing many as statistical, right?
Huge shift. David and Randall Basinger point out that since Hume's time, laws are often seen as descriptive generalizations. They described what tends to happen.
Not necessarily what must happen every single time.
Exactly, which makes the idea of an exception less reality-shattering, perhaps? A German physicist, Werner Schaafs, apparently concluded that even physics has to concede the possibility of divine intervention.
So it's less about rigid rules being broken, maybe.
It seems that way. Swinburne and Mackey use this eye test idea. Some things, if they happen, we just know were miracles, whatever our definition of law is. Like someone rising from the dead.
Yeah, that'd be hard to explain away as just statistics.
Right, and C.S. Lewis had that powerful analogy, something like, nature's laws never caused anything on their own, they just describe the pattern.
Ah, so they're descriptions, not agents. They tell us how the dominoes usually fall, not what pushes them.
That's a good way to put it. They're descriptive, often statistical generalizations of what normally happens. Shafts even noted that statistically, water turning to wine isn't infinitely improbable, just astronomically so.
Okay, so the ground is maybe softer than the violation language suggests. Now, how does historical research fit into all this? Can history help decide if these highly improbable, potentially miraculous events actually occurred?
This is a really important point where, surprisingly, there's a lot of agreement.
Oh yeah, between believers and skeptics.
Generally, yes. Our source highlights that scholars across the board, even from skeptical traditions like logical positivism or postmodernism, tend to agree that historical investigation can yield solid, factual results. Mackey, the skeptic, admitted that some testimony could be stronger evidence than Hume thought.
So the arguments aren't usually about whether history can tell us things.
Not usually about rejecting historical arguments outright. The disagreements tend to be more about the methods of history, how we interpret evidence, or about the inherent plausibility of the specific miracle claim being examined. Is this specific claim believable, given everything else we know?
Got it. So historical evidence is on the table, but how you weigh it, especially against your understanding of natural laws, is where the debate really lies.
Exactly. It's not just philosophy. It's also about historical method and evaluating specific evidence.
Okay, so bringing all these threads together, the different definitions, the debates about natural law, the role of history, the source proposes kind of working definition for its own research project, right?
Yes, it tries to synthesize these ideas into something comprehensive. Let me read it out. A miracle is a dynamic, specialized event that nature is incapable of producing on its own, that temporarily supersedes, or appears to supersede, the normally observed known pattern of nature.
Okay, pause there. Dynamic, specialized event. Nature is incapable of producing. Temporarily supersedes. Let's break that down. Dynamic, specialized.
The idea here is that miracles aren't just anomalies. They're seen as potent, perhaps transformative events originating from God, like injecting something qualitatively different into the normal run of things. The source uses an analogy of full-color occurrences in a black and white reality.
Okay. And Lewis's idea fits here too, that its cause traces back to God.
Right. It connects to nature going forward, but its origin is supernatural.
Then nature is incapable of producing on its own. This seems key.
Absolutely central. It stresses the supernatural origin. These aren't just rare natural events. They're things that the natural system, by its inherent properties, cannot generate.
Like what? What kind of examples?
Things like life arising spontaneously from non-life, truly damaged organs being instantly restored, Lazarus being raised, even creation out of nothing. And it highlights that even skeptics like Hume and Flew agreed nature can't raise the dead as we understand it.
And the resurrection of Jesus is presented as the ultimate example of this.
Yes, particularly because it's described not just as resuscitation, but as transformation to a new kind of immortal life. Stephen Davis is quoted saying, "It seems causally impossible from our current knowledge," which is why it's such a challenge to skepticism.
Okay, and the next part. Temporarily supersedes, or appears to supersede, the normally observed known pattern of nature. This gets back to that violation versus suspension debate.
Exactly. It acknowledges the debate. Does it break the rules or just pause them? Lewis apparently shifted his view, seeing it less as God breaking laws, which he found distasteful, and more as a temporary suspension that actually improves reality without needing to fix the laws afterwards.
So whether you call it violation or suspension, the point is something happens that's clearly outside the normal pattern.
That seems to be the core idea. Something sets aside the usual rules temporarily. Swinburne's non-repeatable counter instance fits nicely here.
Okay, what's the rest of the definition?
It continues. Such an event would be brought about by the power of God or another supernatural agent.
Right, the divine power aspect. Flew called it an act that manifests divine power.
Yes, and this part touches on the kind of God involved. Not an impersonal force or a distant creator, but a personal God who can and would act meaningfully. though it also leaves room for other potential supernatural agents, angels, demons, depending on one's worldview,
Okay, and the final piece.
for the express purpose of acting as a sign or pointer to verify or draw attention to a person or message.
The purposefulness. Miracles aren't random, they mean something.
Exactly. It references the Greek words dunamis, power, and samion, sign or pointer. Miracles as samaya point beyond themselves.
Like the mark on Cain or the sign of Jonah. They weren't just events, they signified something important.
Precisely. They often serve to confirm a teaching or validate the authority of a person delivering a message. Even Mackey agreed the full concept needs this purposive element.
And Flew acknowledged the resurrection, if true, would evidence the Christian message. Tillich saw miracles pointing beyond themselves to truth.
So this purposefulness seems widely accepted as part of what makes an event a miracle, not just an anomaly.
Okay, so that definition pulls together quite a lot. Supernatural origin, beyond nature's capacity, temporarily setting aside natural patterns, divine or supernatural power, and a specific communicative purpose.
Yes, it tries to cover the main bases discussed across these different philosophical perspectives, acknowledging the nuances.
Well, this has definitely been a deep dive. It's clear that defining a miracle is far more complex than it first appears.
It really is. We've gone from Hume's transgression to ideas of suspension, events beyond nature's capacity, the role of purpose. It touches on fundamental questions.
The key takeaway seems to be that this isn't just semantics. How you define miracle reflects how you understand reality, natural law, and the possibility of divine action.
Absolutely. It forces you to think about the relationship between the natural world as we observe it and anything that might lie beyond it.
So a final thought for you, our listener, reflecting on all this, what aspects of these definitions resonate most with you? When you hear claim of a miracle, what criteria seem most important? Does that purpose, that sign aspect, weigh heavily? It's certainly something to ponder how we draw the line, if we draw one at all, between the natural and the potentially supernatural. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.